Hey there, friends, and welcome back to the New Blocks, episode 21 of the educational part of this podcast series. It's been a while since we've done one of these, and today we're going to talk about staking. Exciting stuff on the blockchain side in terms of securing blockchains, proof of stake, and on the economic financial side in terms of staking tokens and then getting some rewards for that, locking them up and getting a return. So, two very exciting topics, two different parts of the staking environment, and a term that has become kind of loaded, Kevin. How are you, buddy? Welcome back. What's been going on with you?
Doing well. Not a whole lot going on. Work's good. I was looking for some relevant news. I think a lot of times in these educational ones, we try to come up with some piece of relevant news that's, in this case, staking related. I can't say that there's a whole lot has changed. This is a concept that's been around in crypto for a while. And so new things in the staking world, it might be different exchanges offering the ability to stake or like different tokens releasing. But I think to your point, the term has become a bit loaded at this point, and it's worth digging in. I wanted to make this episode so that we could go into some of the nuance here and maybe make some comparisons to like traditional finance, because I think some people have a concept of staking already without really knowing the new term.
Okay. Well, I love it when you get excited about definitions. And proof of stake is relevant to all the Ethereum fans out there because it has been the highly prized solution to getting off of proof of work and switching Ethereum to proof of stake. And some of the other side chain like scaling solutions like Polygon are operating on proof of stake. Ronin in the Axie universe currently proof of authority, but will be moving to proof of stake in the very near future. Ron's been out there to be farmed, but you can't unwrap it yet, so it hasn't quite been released into the wild, you could say. But there might be some staking news coming up in the future. I think 5 years ago, we definitely would have thought, if we could get in our little time machine and just listen to ourselves talk, that staking for ETH would have been out by now. This is one of these things that's taken a little bit longer than expected, and is complicated because it does have really big security implications. And the way they're testing this is there is a version of ETH 2.0 with staking live. It's just in like a test form, correct?
Yeah, sort of. It's in production, but it's a separate blockchain than the one that you use when you transact on with Ethereum. So I think a lot of this episode it will be based off of what we've talked about in the consensus episode a little bit earlier in the series. We kind of dug into a little bit more about consensus mechanisms, about the difference between proof of work and proof of stake. And Ethereum is always a good example because they've been in this transition for a while. I think the original estimate that Vitalik put out on switching to proof of stake was something like 2014.
Are you
And
serious?
yes, and he recently was he put together a list of like things that he got wrong over time, and that was one of them. And he
Wow.
basically said, "You should laugh at me for this because this is pretty terrible."
Yeah, well,
Uh,
hindsight's 2020, and
yeah,
working on the developer side, I can definitely speak to how difficult it is to project how long things will take. The early Axie roadmap, especially, was very much like that. Like, yeah, we'll make land in a year, no problem. Like, we'll have all this and that and all these different features, and you start building and realize, oh wow, putting all this together is just a lot harder and a lot more time consuming than I realized. And people don't realize that the environment that you're building in is still relatively crude compared to a lot of the traditional centralized tools. I think,
yeah,
there's always the problem too that the test net is not the same as the main net. And that's one thing that we learned a couple times. Like when you're competing for block space is sometimes different when you're not competing for block space. And that little difference can sometimes make all the difference in the world when you magnify that onto like millions of users at the same time. So anyway, I digress. That's a different kind of rabbit hole. But maybe let's talk about consensus a little bit, buddy. What do we got with
yeah.
this rabbit hole here?
Yeah, and I think it couldn't have been back to my example of Vitalik's estimate. It couldn't have been 2014 because that was like before Ethereum. But regardless, like it has gone way past the the amount of time that he anticipated. So let's quickly define staking in the sense. And when you Google this term, you'll see a lot of different definitions. The one I would throw out is the process of locking up crypto in exchange for rewards or interest. That's kind of a broad definition. But within that, there are kind of two major subgroups of staking when people talk about it. So the first one is referring to staking that exists on a layer one blockchain network, such as Ethereum is in the process of transitioning toward it. Tezos has been around forever. Cosmos,
Tezos,
like a lot of these blockchains that
great shout outs.
Yeah, once Ethereum was released and announced its plans to switch to proof of stake, they newer blockchains decided like, okay, well, we think that's probably a good idea. We're just going to start on proof of stake. There was kind of a pretty valid reason why Ethereum chose to start on proof of work, and that was really to help disseminate Ether, the asset, into as decentralized a group as possible. Part of mining and proof of work in general, the one benefit to it, especially starting out a new currency, you don't have to necessarily convince anyone that this thing is valuable and therefore you should lock it up so that you can earn more of it. And, you know, kind of like create this new thing and try to convince people in the same step. With mining and proof of work, you burn electricity, and so like that's sort of the value that you are extracting. And now we have a starting point. At least this token should be worth the cost of that electricity, right? And you know, mining hardware in the case of Ethereum, graphics cards are accessible pretty much everywhere in the world. So that's a kind of a good way to decentralize it as much as possible.
Yeah, that's the key part about proof of work that I try to use to break through to people, because I say it's an imperfect solution, but when you think about what's one of the most like basic common denominators across all humans around the planet, it is electricity, and now it's becoming like access to computing power. Yes, it has gotten to the point where it takes like extreme computing power to really make a difference, but you know, that's the point we're at now. Getting to that point, it does spread things out quite a bit. And when it comes to proof of stake from a consensus mechanism, it's very easy for it to become a thing where it rewards the rich for being rich, and by being rich you put up more money and you make more money, and it kind of compounds, and over time you end up with this same issue where a lot of it floats towards the top, right? And I think that's why the proof of work starting point feels like maybe it provides a little bit of insulation there when you start to scale things.
Yeah, and of course, if you look over at Bitcoin, you can make the argument that they are already far along in the transition of essentially that. The people that mine Bitcoin now aren't individual users; they are big organizations that have a ton of capital, and so like it was an inevitable thing, and to some degree in the proof of work world. But I agree that yeah, I think it kind of made sense and allowed Ethereum to kind of push off that a little bit. So one within the category of layer one network staking, one thing to understand is the purpose, and the purpose changes when you're talking about layer one network staking versus single asset staking, which we'll talk about after. You know, staking a currency on top of a blockchain, something like AXS, isn't used to at like the layer one blockchain,
right? It's
level.
not used to secure the network. It's staked for like financial rewards. That's kind of the other side of it. Same as like Sushi Swap, right? That was the Sushi Swap novelty that they added into or novel invention, I should say. They took what Uniswap did and then added rewards to it. And you have the Sushi Swap token, and you can lock up your sushi and you can stake it, so to speak, as just a single token, no pair, just by itself, no impermanent loss, no risk in that regard in terms of fluctuation beyond what you would be exposed to anyway for holding the token, and it'll pay you a rate that fluctuates, but in the tune of like 10 to 20% or something APR, and that's that's pretty good. That's a pretty. I mean, if you want to be holding sushi anyway, that's not a bad reward. And of course, there's been times where I think part of that rate has to do with fees that come through the protocol. Some of that gets reverted into the bonuses for the staking pool, so those rewards go up, based on more people using the website versus how many people are staking, and then that draws more people into the staking pool, and it kind of becomes this feedback loop that almost just serves as a marketing machine. It gets people on your platform, and once you have sushi and you're getting these rewards, it's very convenient for you to use all the other things and maybe get into some of the double token pools, like Ethereum plus something else that you want to be holding, and all these other things. Like that's where I stake Ethereum and YGG tokens to get YGG and sushi tokens as a reward. And to bring it all back full circle, as Kevin was saying, that is totally separate from the like Ethereum level protocol staking that secures the network. They're called the same thing, but totally different trees of the definition.
Yeah, I think the way I would describe the difference between these two uses of the word is that blockchain staking is for security and single asset staking is for, incentives. So it's like for the economic lever that you can use to adjust the incentives for your platform. In your case, you use the example of like Sushi Swap or any of these other where maybe you're earning some of the sushi token for providing two different assets, but then you can take that sushi token and stake it and just earn additional of it. That's sort of a lever that they can pull to disincentivize people from just dumping their new sushi onto the market.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It seems weird, and it almost took me a little while to wrap my brain around when I first started staking. The having two different pools made sense to me. Like staking on Uniswap in a pair. It's like, okay, yeah, there's people on both sides of that, and you need liquidity for this smart contract to be able to facilitate the trades. I understand what's happening here. I didn't understand when the first time I saw like Pancake Swap on the Binance Smart Chain, which is just a Uniswap clone, but over on BSC. And there was the AutoCake pool, like when I started, 8 months ago, it was paying like 110% APY in the auto staking pool that like compounded every 10 seconds or whatever, anytime somebody claimed the free transaction. So like, I don't know, man. That kind of blew my mind. Like, how could they afford to do this? And the answer is it's very short-term focused, right? You can't afford to do that forever, and the rewards usually start high because you're trying to draw liquidity in, and then it keeps the token price high because it's locked up, so people can't sell it while it's locked up, even if they can easily withdraw it. Your game theory-wise, you're more likely to keep it locked up if you're getting pretty good rewards, all things equal, and it helps kind of bolster this whole cycle you have going on with the high emissions that are required to pay that kind of a return on an exchange token like that. So I don't know, maybe that got complex in terms of tokenomics, but I think like comparing it to marketing dollars really is a good analogy in the sense of the crypto space, because that's like, you're marketing to crypto people. You're trying to get them to bring their money off of another platform and put it on your platform, because once it's there, it takes effort to move it to another platform, right? So yeah, anyway.
Yeah, I think and another thing to kind of compare it to in your head is right now the Fed is figuring out what they want to do in terms of like adjusting interest rates and inflating the dollar at whatever speed they decide. That's happening at the like US macro level. I think of a lot of times just at a very high level, when a project is determining what makes sense for their token, you can sort of think of it similarly, where the Fed needs to take into account the entire economy. SushiSwap only really needs to figure out what makes sense for SushiSwap. So a little bit of a comparison, but like one comparison I would make to the layer one network staking side would be thinking of it kind of like a government bond. When you give your US dollars to the government in exchange for a bond, they are using that money to strengthen the economy in whatever way they decide. And you are earning interest in the process. Mm-hmm. They might go spend that on military budget, to secure the border or whatever it is that they decide. And in a similar sense, the layer one network staking is doing the same sort of security, right? You are locking up your tokens in exchange for securing the network, and you're being paid for securing the network in interest.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So, another comparison.
Yeah. No, I like it. And I think when it also depends on the tokenomics of like the specific token you're talking about, you know, and when you're structuring the distribution of a token for any given project, normally if you do a token sale, it's not like you're offering 100% of the tokens available to the public for the sale. You know, that might be like 10 or 20%, maybe 5 or 10% go to co-founders, maybe another 10% will be used for marketing dollars. In the case of Axie, there's like a big play to earn fund of like, okay, this is just money that's reserved for rewards and prizes in game over time. And depending on how you have that structured and what their unlock is like, sometimes they can be built in a way where the majority of the tokens that already have a finite supply are behind these very reasonable walls. Like, for example, the play to earn fund doesn't get unlocked until they release like the beta version of the game, you know, something like that. You lock it up in some sort of even if it's just a social contract of how these things are going to be distributed, that can have a really big impact on your ability to pay rewards and, you know, kind of sustain this higher, you know, APR over time. I mean, I think the AXS single token staking APR is going to stay around that like 80 to 90% unless there's a huge injection of people depositing more of it into the staking pools. But now this is like we're in the constant emission phase for the next like 3 or 4 years or something. So it's going to stay relatively steady unless there's big user growth or big amounts, you know, being injected. So it does also come down to good tokenomics sometimes, and that discipline of like, you know, Axie did an ICO 3 years ago now, something like that. Then being very disciplined with those token emissions over time, that can be really powerful if your project does start to grow in its scope and its player base scale, or user base, I guess I should say.
Yeah. Yep. Definitely. The thing to think about, I mean, every project is going to be different. Every token is going to have a different market cap or total supply. And so when you're looking at a token, there's sort of the economics at play will have to do with how much of the token is in circulation, how much exists in total supply. Are new tokens able to be minted? And a lot of this is going to play into what the economics will effectively be when you have like a sort of, I'm trying to think of an example, just the general idea of, you know, you have a token that is inflating, and, you know, let's say maybe I don't know if this was actually it, but that Iron Finance one, where
Titan,
that was it. Yep, where the APY was something pretty nuts. Like, what was that?
It went up to $1 billion. It passed $1 billion, I think, at its
interest.
peak. $1 billion percent APY return.
Like when you get into that I compare to like a nuclear reactor exploding, where like it's this series of more higher rates, in like draws in more money, draws in higher rates, and it gets to a certain tipping point where the whole thing just falls apart, and that thing collapsed over the course of an hour or so.
I don't know if no, it was longer than that. It was more like a week, but the last day it crashed over the course of like 12 hours on its like final descent down to zero. But I don't think I can explain the entire system just offhand, because it was slightly clever, but it had something to do with like a stable coin that was backed by like 70% USD, which is another stable coin. Then that remaining 30% was another token. And then there was like another token on top of that was some sort of dynamic percentage thing that tried to fill in the gaps. And when there was like Iron and Titan, and you used Iron to mint Titan. So that's Titan was this thing or Iron, I guess, was this thing that would fill in the gaps somehow. And the rewards were built where it was a fixed amount, but then all of it was getting locked up to mint Titan. So iron had like no supply, and everybody was trying to buy it so that they could mint the stable coin that was getting really good rewards. But the iron was also getting really good rewards, and all the rewards were fixed. So as the prices went up, the technical like interest return just like went through the roof because it was the same amount of tokens regardless of what they were worth. So when those tokens go like, 1,000x or something, it like compounds like crazy. So, every second you're like making visible money if you put a couple ETH into it, because it's a billion APY, dude. A billion. Not a million, a billion. It's a lot of zeros. It's a stupid.
Maybe all of that is to say, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
Yeah, this is the thing that Mark Cuban famously lost a lot of money on, that people kind of rake him over the coals for. And I think what he got blasted for kind of is that he kind of used that to say, like, maybe some regulation's good. And it's just like, yeah, maybe. But this also is not like, come on, man. This one was clearly not like, this is.
That was a do your own research.
Well, and it's hard to regulate stuff until it happens too, So it's like it's a clever idea of the way they stacked stable coins on top of minting another stable coin, so it had some backing, but then it had this other thing that could also scale in pricing. It was almost like they had this idea and then the feedback loop kicked in, and it was like, oh my god, this blew up way more than we thought. Who knows? Maybe it was more nefarious than that. I really don't know. But that was a really interesting thing to observe in real time and just see it like actually crash. And you start to see how fast it's going down. You're like, I think this is going to zero. Like for real. Actually for real. Like sell right now. Right this second. It's rare that you see something do that. It's really rare that something goes from like $100 to $0 in 12 hours.
Yeah. That was like pretty catastrophic failure and was pretty... stuff like that in crypto, like it's a good sobering reminder that like all of this that we're doing is risky, and all of this can, the value can change. Just in general, my thought process is don't put anything into crypto that you're not willing to lose. And in that case, like there's a pretty big risk spectrum within crypto. Like you can have some pretty safe bets. Even like US dollar stable coins are technically crypto, and like yes, there's different risks, but that was the far end of the risk spectrum. And there's a lot of stuff like that. I think this is another reminder that staking is a loaded term. I think
that was technically staking. That was what we called it.
Like that was like a Rube Goldberg machine that was like very different from the concept of staking elsewhere. But like an example would be when I say like you should stake your AXS. That might mean putting your AXS in the single asset staking pool on Ronin, and or it could also mean go provide liquidity to the AXS ETH pool,
right?
And like sometimes people use the term staking in that way. I think that's more so liquidity providing, but that's also like
people call them both
phrase.
staking, and it is. One, it has a completely different risk implication with the impermanent loss than the other one does, for sure. I guess you're right. There are different terms, but somehow they got all muddled together, and now we just refer to all of it as staking. And it is interesting on the Axie ecosystem because you'll be able to stake AXS from like a financial kind of reward in the staking pool just as a single token, and then I imagine... there will be some sort of like staking thing for Ron, because that's like ETH is to Ethereum as Ron is to Ronin. That's like the thing that you'll pay for with gas, and that secures the network. So there's also staking there, but it's like the layer one style of staking. It's there for security and as a consensus mechanism, and serves a totally different purpose. So maybe it is time that we start delineating these terms. Like kind of our buddy JD Hyper, he's coined that term now, or maybe he hasn't coined it, but he's been pushing the game token term instead of utility token for these games. And it's sort of like a differentiator between, as an example, Subducks. They emit Volt tokens. You use those Volt tokens to do stuff in the environment, like upgrade the frogs and make the Megatoad. That's what I would describe as a utility token. It's sort of like gamified, and it's emitted, and you use it to do stuff, but it's fundamentally different from a game token that's being emitted as rewards for a game that's sort of designed to be replayable, and like like an Axie scholar plays Axie kind of every day or like 5 days a week or something. It's just a different tokenomic design as opposed to a fixed set of NFTs emitting a fixed set of tokens over a certain period of time. It's just way more complex than that, especially when you start to scale it. So maybe we need some more terms, as the ecosystem grows and as all these things continue to evolve. We need some more accurate words to communicate with each other.
Yeah, and we need to be very deliberate when you're using the word stake in particular, because we do have some words like liquidity providing, even though that's not fun to say, LPing for short. But even there, like I've struggled to describe the difference between like staking, LPing, and farming. If I were to try, I would say staking is generally single asset. Liquidity providing is generally 2 assets where you are earning usually exchange trading fees in the process, or I think that's probably it for LPing. And then farming is oftentimes where you are liquidity providing, and on top of the interest that you're earning, you are being paid for with an additional token. I think like the sushi swap example. But again, these are all kind of just like high level, like maybe.
So then what do you call staking for a node? If you run an Ethereum node, what are you doing?
That would staking. Just fall into the staking bucket. Yeah, I wouldn't put that into any of the other terms. Yeah.
Okay. That's your baseline.
Words are hard.
Let's jump into a couple lightning rounds and wrap this bad boy up. So why do protocols and exchanges have this single token staking? What does this help?
Yeah, I mean, I think this goes into the examples that we were giving, like sushi swap or pancake swap. I just try to think of it as I think the marketing dollars is a good way to think of it, and like economic levers is another good way to think about it. I think, as you mentioned, it's something that needs a kind of long-term strategy. If Uniswap, when they launched their Uni token, they started out offering some pools where, like, if you stake to the ETH DAI pair, then they'll give you additional rewards in the Uni token. They did that for a short period of time, and they haven't really done that again. But that's like kind of a tool they have in their back pocket in the future if they want to bootstrap liquidity for some new asset pair. Another example would be if they wanted to incentivize people to provide liquidity on like a layer 2. If they want to go launch on some new layer 2 and they want people to move their tokens over there, they can say, hey guys, like you can earn nothing on mainnet, or you can go earn additional Uni tokens over here. But that needs to be taken into account with a longer term strategy of what they're really doing, because it is kind of similar to marketing dollars.
Yeah.
Cool. So would you characterize staking or just these different approaches to locking up tokens as good or bad? And we talked about Titan as an example, but how do these single coin staking pool APYs go up into the hundreds or the thousands or the 10,000%? APY, by the way, is annual percentage yield. Just that's the interest you would earn if that amount were coming at you for a full year.
Yeah, and compounding. So like the difference between APR and APY. APR is non-compounding. So it's like you put this money in, this is the interest or the return that you're getting, and it's just coming back to you and not being put back into the pool. APY is calculated where if it's like auto compounding, so to speak. So the money that you're earning is getting put back into the base principal. So over time, that earns more rewards as you're earning rewards, because your rewards go back into that base point. So APR versus APY. Either way, 100% APR is amazing. That's insanely high. We talked about it earlier. This is one of these things that it just kind of is. It's part of the ecosystem. It's a reward structure. Like anything else, it's a tool. It can be used for good. It can be used by anonymous folks for bad. We've seen a lot of, especially on these side chains where it's cheaper to do transactions, a lot of these like pretty clear pump and dump type tokens. And when you look at their tokenomics, their emissions are really aggressive at the beginning, and it builds up as people like ramp up to bring liquidity on. And anytime the demand outweighs the supply, things go like this. But the real question is what controls the supply? And in a lot of these token emissions or a lot of these games or protocols where there's a breeding or a time element, eventually it starts to expand in a non-linear way, and that supply then surpasses the demand, and that's what causes the dump as the too much of it comes out into the marketplace. To sustain 100%, APR means you have to continually increase the amount that you're emitting in terms of new tokens being issued to people. And then when people sell those, that's the sell pressure that makes it go down. So it's not inherently good or bad. It's really how you use it and how you implement it into your ecosystem. And I think it can be done responsibly where 100% is actually realistic, as we saw with the Katana launch, with the amount of liquidity that was put over there for those premium rates at the beginning. But it's already down to 88% just through emissions alone, because it was ridiculous to pay that intro. So you always have to look at the timing and the tokenomics and the strategy behind it to really get that clear picture of why is this number so high for any given token or protocol.
That makes sense.
All right. So how do you stake ETH? The layer one stuff, the protocol, the consensus. That's what I was trying to get at. How do you actually stake it? Is it running a node, or what's the setup here?
Yeah, so there's a few different ways, and this is going to be different for different networks. For Ethereum in particular, the first way would be obviously just manually running your own node. So the requirements for running a node that is staking is you need 32 ETH, which if I were to check that right now, actually, do you mind pulling out the price while I'm talking? What that comes out to? And the percent that you earn, I think currently at the time of recording this is like 6.5 or so percent.
So it's 2,500. So what's 2,500 times 32? 80,000 exactly. So 80K ish, 75K.
So it's not cheap, right? So I think this is an area of criticism that people that are entering the crypto space will point to and say, okay, well, you want everyone to run a node, but it's going to cost me 80 grand at today's price to run that, right? So a couple of things to understand. One, you don't need to stake to run a node. Right now behind me, I have a node that I'm running. I'm currently setting up and syncing, plan to stake eventually.
So it's just a node. You don't have to stake to have the node there that just helps support the network. Okay, interesting.
Yep, exactly.
And you don't get paid anything to do that. It just does it for the love of the game. Okay.
For the love of the game, yeah. Now the 32 ETH staking, then like once you decide if you are going to do that, at the moment, because we're still in this transition phase, going from proof of work to proof of stake, when you choose to stake 32 ETH, you are locking that away, and there is currently no way to unstake. It is a separate blockchain that only functions as the ability to import ETH from blockchain that's currently Ethereum, and you're basically just locking it away. It's on the roadmap once the merge occurs, once we've combined these two blockchains, and now we have a single blockchain that does all of the transaction and does proof of stake. Then they will, developers will add the ability to unlock it. But that is sort of if you were to decide that you want to run a staking node, you are locking away money for an indefinite amount of time. So it's something to really consider. You can also, you can have a physical node. You can run it through an online hosted provider like AWS.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, this is like ultra hard mode. I wouldn't suggest you do this unless this was just like totally your jam and you're willing to do this. The easy mode is something like Coinbase. You can use a service like Coinbase where they provide staking as a service. So you choose any amount of of ETH that you want to lock up. It doesn't have to be the full 32. It could be, 0.001 ETH, and they'll lock that away. They'll add that to a staking node, and they'll cobble together 32 ETH from a bunch of different users, and then they'll earn interest on it and they'll pay you back. They do take a pretty sizable cut. I want to say it was like 25% of interest earned, or something along those lines. So I think if you stake through Coinbase, you'll earn closer to like 5% at the moment. And again, these fluctuate with how many
But
people.
it's easy. You just put it there, and it's basically connected to your account that you can use to cash out whenever you want to. So there's
But the caveat there is with you actually can't cash out. They have not yet implemented the ability to do what is called liquid staking. So they are sort of constrained by the fact that you can't cash out on the actual blockchain. But they're moving to the next one. There's a concept called liquid staking where you add an additional token into the mix. So there are two, Lido and Rocket Pool, that are liquid staking providers that you give one ether and the smart contract produces one new token. In the case of Lido, it's called STETH for staked ETH. In the case of Rocket Pool, it's RETH. And this new token is something that you can hold and trade with people on the market. So even though the underlying ETH is still locked away, you can go sell your STETH or your RETH to someone else. So in that sense, it's like more liquid. It's called liquid staking.
I see.
And so this is kind of getting into more the medium territory where you do, like, in order to stake with Lido, you don't necessarily have to run a node or anything. You just need to hold the STETH asset. So you would have to use something like Uniswap or any other DEX and go trade your ETH into stake ETH into STETH, and you would earn the interest while holding it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it's sort of meta. It's like almost it's like pegged to ETH, but then you get the rewards of it like it's staked. It's interesting, very interesting.
Yeah, and that as a general concept is kind of it's kind of fun because a lot of these other networks that are sort of like based off of like tangential to Ethereum can take this general concept. I, for a hackathon project, built a liquid staking protocol with a team called Tenderize Me. I came up with the name. I'm pretty proud. And it was for a couple of specific networks. It was like Keeper, Token, a few others. But the general premise was the same, right? You can, instead of like locking away an asset and not being able to touch it, you get an IOU receipt, and then you can go sell that receipt. And like, there's some differences between Lido and Rocket Pool, but I think at the end of the day, those kind of fall into the medium difficulty bucket and are a bit more decentralized, I would say, than the Coinbases of the world.
I see.
So you have a lot of options when it comes to making ETH. I think, for the newcomers, you can't really go wrong with just locking up a little bit in Coinbase, but just know that you can't unlock it.
Yeah, keep it simple. I think that's the. It gets complicated pretty quick, and you can work your way up, and start with some some single tokens that you believe in. I think in general that's good advice. Start with things that you believe in, and then look for the opportunities that surround that in terms of staking and rewards, rather than trying to chase the rewards. Chasing the rewards is a tough game. It's not an impossible one to win at, but it's deceptively hard, and there's a lot of other people trying to stay ahead of the curve that you have to be competitive with, and that becomes a game all in of itself. So it's much better if it's like you're buying an asset that you really like. If you like the sappy seals and you buy one, you're like, I love this seal, and then they say, hey, now you can stake your seal and get some blubber. Well, dude, that's awesome. That blubber is just like a bonus for having that little seal that you were going to have anyway. If that's the mentality, then staking's awesome. But I think chasing rewards, having been there a little bit last year, it's stressful. It can definitely get stressful. We had a friend that got into Titan that was very much stressed out by it. And I understand why, because it was crazy. At any moment, you felt like it could just take a nosedive, and then it did. So maybe that's a good thing to leave us on.
I think, that just the reminder that even if you're earning whatever percent interest on a token, like the value of the token is kind of the important part there. So you could be earning 1 billion% interest, and if the value drops to 0, it doesn't really matter.
There's an Axie guy named AUR, who tweets regularly, and after the market crashed the other day, he said, me doesn't want to hold USD because it loses 8% of its purchasing power every year. ETH loses 35% of its purchasing power in 2 days, or something to that effect. And it's just like, I think it was 14% in one day, but either way, it's like, I feel you on that. I feel kind of silly because you get caught up chasing those gains, and then you realize, when stuff's going up, you're like, oh my God, why do I have dollars? And when stuff's going down, you go, yes, I'm so glad I have dollars. So it is really important to diversify. It's a really stupid old platitude, but being overexposed to crypto is only fun when it's pumping. When it's not pumping, it's really unfun. You feel like, I'm diversified. Look, I've got Polkadot, I've got Chainlink, I've got all these different tokens, I've got NFTs, Kevin. Look, I've got a Megatone. And then you realize that everything is like part of the same ecosystem, and sometimes the whole ecosystem just moves together, and sometimes it's related to the market outside. It could be COVID or these other big world forces that drive the whole thing. But even though the USD's got its issues, it is nice to have some stability. Maybe we should start holding euros, Kevin. Maybe this is where it's at. Let's start. Is that the new gold? Picking up euros?
It's not a bad idea. I feel like diversity within stablecoins is an interesting way to diversify.
That's an interesting topic, maybe for another future episode. But of course, never financial advice here, folks. We appreciate you listening. You can find us on all the normal places you'd expect to find a podcast. Excuse me. It's a pleasure to be back, and we'll see you on the next version of the New Blocks.
Peace.